All right. Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you for turning up in such high numbers. As you know, today is the day for the spring economic forecast, and I'm here with Commissioner Dombrovskis, who is going to present to you the file. The Commissioner will start with some opening remarks as usual, and then afterwards we'll take a few questions. Commissioner, please take the floor.
So, good morning, everyone. Let me begin with five key messages contained in our spring economic forecast. First, hidden global uncertainty and trade tensions are weighing on EU growth. Second, the EU economy remains resilient despite the challenging circumstances we face. We expect moderate growth this year and an acceleration of growth next year. So EU's GDP is expected to grow by 1.1% in 2025 and 1.5% in 2026. The euro area economy is expected to grow by 0.9% this year and 1.4% next year. Third, the labor market remains robust. More jobs are being created and real wages are rising. This means more Europeans at work and more money in their pockets. Fourth, inflation is falling faster than expected, driven by lower energy prices. And fifth and finally, risks to the outlook remain tilted on the downside, particularly due to trade tensions. The spring forecast highlights the need for the Union to take swift and decisive measures to bolster competitiveness and secure long-term prosperity, and the time for this action is now. Let me begin with a look at the impact of tariffs and uncertainty. Since taking office in January, the new US administration has raised tariffs on goods imports from an increasing number of trade partners and on specific goods. The unpredictable and seemingly arbitrary rationale behind the US tariff announcements has driven global economic policy uncertainty to levels not seen since the darkest moments of COVID-19 pandemic. The average tariff rate the US puts on imports is higher today than at any point since 1930s. The US tariff announcements in April have also resulted in very high levels of volatility in financial markets. This market volatility remains elevated and sentiment is fragile, and uncertainty over the US trade and broader economic policy still looms large. These developments obviously weigh on global economic activity and trade. The spring forecast has revised global growth and trade down. Global growth outside the EU is now projected to reach 3.2% in both 2025 and 2026. This represents a downward revision of 0.4 percentage points from the autumn forecast. Downward revisions to global imports have been much more significant. Although trade remains robust in the first quarter of 2025, likely due to advance purchases ahead of tariffs, global imports are now expected to expand at a rate well below global economic activity over the forecast horizon. In other words, trade is expected to be a less important driver of global growth. Europe should respond by removing barriers in our internal market to make domestic demand an even larger driver of economic growth. Closer to home, the spring forecast revises EU's GDP growth to 1.1% this year and 1.5% in 2026. This amounts to a downwards revision of 0.7 percentage points in cumulative terms for 2025-2026. Higher US tariffs and trade uncertainty are weighing on EU exports. They are combining with structural headwinds to competitiveness in certain industries. Imports are also revised down. In 2025, net exports subtract nearly 0.5% from growth, a drag that fades in 2026. This is a significant change from our autumn forecast. Public consumption is set to slow from 1.7% in 2025 to 1.3% in 2026, providing a weaker boost to growth. Growth will rely on domestic demand, especially private consumption. Gross fixed capital formation is expected to rebound after 1.9% decline in 2024, but markedly less than projected in autumn. Let me say a few more words on drivers of consumption and investment. The good news is that our labor markets are performing strongly. Despite modest GDP growth in 2024, the EU economy still added 1.7 million jobs. Employment is set to expand by around 1% in the period 2025 to 2026, representing another 2 million jobs over the forecast horizon. The unemployment rate is expected to fall to 5.7% in 2026, a new historic low. The creation of more jobs and the reduction of unemployment are clearly positive trends for young people who are transitioning into workforce and seeking to establish their careers. Tight labor markets and recovering productivity are supporting wage growth. After growth of 5.3% in 2024, nominal wages are set to rise by 3.9% this year and 3.0% next year. Real wages are set to fully recover lost purchasing power in almost all member states. This is welcome news for European consumers who have faced significant pressure on their household budgets in recent years as rising costs eroded their purchasing power. Private consumption is also making an important contribution to growth. A resilient labor market and stronger wage growth is expected to result in a higher growth in private consumption than had been projected in autumn forecast. It is now projected to grow by 1.5% in 2025 and further strengthen in 2026. However, uncertainty is keeping the savings rates higher, holding back a stronger rebound. Turning to investment. Gross fixed capital formation is expected to grow by 1.5% this year and 2.4% next year. This follows a 1.9% decline in 2024, but is still weaker than in autumn forecast as low capacity utilization and higher uncertainty have dampened investment. Elevated uncertainty and tightening of financial conditions have also exerted a drag on investment growth. Of course, more investment ultimately means a more prosperous and competitive European economy. More investment means higher quality, more productive jobs for European citizens. Conversely, weaker investment is a cause of concern. This is why a key pillar of European Commission's competitiveness compass is to attract and encourage investment in the European economy, particularly investment directed at innovation. This underlines the importance of European Commission's Savings and Investments Union strategy. We need to allow the estimated 10 trillion euros of household savings to go to work to boost investment, growth and competitiveness while helping citizens earn a higher return on their savings. We forecast that infrastructure and R&D investment should expand more rigorously, helped by the ongoing Recovery and Resilience Facility and a stronger role of cohesion funding in the years ahead. However, equipment investment is set to remain weak and should expand only slightly this year. This underscores the need to step up our work to boost the competitiveness of our manufacturing sector. Residential construction is poised to recover in 2024 and expand further in 2026 as credit conditions for households are more favorable than for corporates and rising home prices restore profitability. Construction indicators suggest a turnaround is already underway. All in all, the Recovery Resilience Facility drives a substantial share of expansion in investment. Looking ahead, we expect cohesion funding to play an increasingly important role in driving investment in the years ahead. This underpins the value and importance of public policies that support investment in challenging and uncertain times. Inflation continues to decline. Again, this represents good news for European consumers who have seen their purchasing power severely eroded by rising inflation in recent years. Headline inflation in the euro area is expected to decrease from 2.4% last year to an average of 2.1% this year and 1.7% next year. In the EU as a whole, inflation is set to follow similar dynamics, dropping from a slightly higher rate in 2024 to 1.9% in 2026. Several factors are exerting downward pressure on EU inflation. Significantly lower energy commodity prices are driving consumer energy inflation into negative territory in 2025 and 2026. Besides energy, this inflation is also being driven by intensified price competition in non-energy goods linked to shifting trade dynamics and the appreciation of the euro, which reduces import prices. While inflation keeps decreasing in all member states, its pace differs widely between them. As you can see in the map behind me, inflation is set to remain high in Central and Eastern European countries due to stronger growth in unit labor costs. However, over time, the difference between inflation in member states is expected to become smaller. Now, turning to public finances. After declining to 3.2% in 2024, the EU general government deficit is projected to increase to 3.3% in 2025 and remain at that level next year. After stabilizing in 2024 at around 82%, the debt ratio is expected to edge to about 83.2% of GDP this year and 84.5% next year. This modest increase is driven by a less favorable difference between interest rates and economic growth. That is to say, interest rates on debt have increased and nominal growth has slowed, resulting in a higher level of debt to GDP ratio. The impact of the application of national escape clause of the Stability and Growth Pact, which can provide member states with flexibility for higher defense expenditure, is not yet accounted in the forecast. While by the cut-off date of the forecast, a majority of member states have requested its activation, their defense spending plans were not specified enough to be included in the baseline projections. The same applies to Germany's decision to boost defense and investment spending. This could not be included in a forecast projections as well. 11 member states reported a deficit exceeding 3% of GDP in 2024. These were Belgium, Spain, France, Italy, Malta, Austria, Slovakia, Finland, Hungary, Poland, and Romania. This number is set to remain stable in 2025 before dropping to 9 member states in 2026. In 2026, most member states are projected to record deficit lower than before the pandemic. As usual, the projections for 2026 are based on unchanged policies in the absence of budgetary plans for that year. Now moving to the overall risk analysis. The risks to the outlook remain tilted to the downside. They are dominated by potential developments on trade side. Trade tensions between the US and the EU and the US and China could depress GDP growth and rekindle inflationary pressures. On the upside, further de-escalation of EU-US trade tensions or a faster expansion of EU trade, including through new free trade agreements, could help sustain EU growth. Increased defense spending could also contribute positively to growth as a secondary benefit to the primary goal of enhancing the EU's security. Finally, implementing reforms to boost competitiveness, such as deepening the single market, advancing the savings and investment union, along with our ambitious simplification agenda, would further strengthen the resilience of EU's economy. Spring forecast also includes several analytical studies. So allow me to briefly introduce two of them. First, on the macroeconomic effects of US tariffs. In our forecast, it's impossible to disentangle the effects of tariffs, heightened uncertainty, and tighter financial conditions on the growth and inflation outlook. A simulation exercise, nevertheless, allows us to explore impact of different shocks. We simulated the impact of US tariffs announced up to the 2nd of April. These near-universal tariffs would cause a notable contraction on global trade and economic activity. By the end of 2026, global GDP would be 0.4% below baseline, and world trade would fall by 2.9%. Consistent with the textbook economic theory, the result shows that everyone would lose from imposition of such measures. However, the cumulative growth over 2025 and 26 in the US would be about 1 percentage point lower than the baseline without tariffs, as the EU would experience a significantly milder hit of around 0.2 percentage points. Of course, these numbers do not include indirect effects of confidence and investor sentiment, as well as fallouts from potential market turmoil and volatility. In short, and by contrast, if you want a stable, sound, and predictable place to do business and to invest, the EU is a place for it. The second analysis looks at the potential economic impact of higher defense spending in the EU. Based on the information available by the cut-off date, the forecast projects an increase in EU defense spending from 1.4% of GDP in 2024 to 1.6% in 2025 and 2026. These figures are based on the so-called COFOG defense definition, which is consistent with other indicators used for fiscal surveillance. The activation of national escape clause would allow member states to increase defense spending by up to 1.5 percentage points of GDP annually between 2025 and 2028. By the cut-off date of the forecast, the majority of member states have already decided to request the activation of national escape clause, those being Belgium, Bulgaria, Denmark, Germany, Estonia, Greece, Latvia, Lithuania, Hungary, Poland, Portugal, Slovenia, Slovakia, and Finland. In line with no policy change assumption, the forecast did not make assumptions on policy choices still to be taken, and it does not include plans that are not credibly announced or sufficiently detailed by the cut-off date. A linear increase in defense spending of all member states to up to 1.5% of GDP by 2028 would lift the GDP in the EU by about 0.5% by 2028. It is important to note that the positive effect would be larger if spending would be targeted at the European research and development, infrastructure and production, and less rely on imports. This increase in expenditure would temporarily raise government debt. The additional flexibility, moreover, is broadly equivalent to the fiscal adjustment requirements over the same time. As a result, the underlying EU fiscal position in 2028 would not be weaker than in 2024, and in most cases, the start of debt reduction would be simply delayed rather than derailed. With this, I conclude my presentation and stand ready for your questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Commissioner, for your detailed introduction. Before we jump in, let's not forget that, as usual, we have a technical briefing, so we would kindly ask you to reserve your technical questions for that event. But we start with you, Thomas, please.
Thank you very much for the briefing. Thomas Manuelson at Euractiv. I have, I guess I'll just ask two questions then. So the first is, I guess maybe the obvious one, just how seriously we should take these specific numbers, given, as you mentioned, the sort of exceptional, unprecedented geopolitical environment and policy uncertainty. So in particular, I mean, how confident are you, for instance, that growth this year in the EU will be 1.1% or even close to 1.1%? So that's the first question. And then the second question I have is about the impact of the strengthening euro. So, I mean, on the one hand, this is disinflationary, but on the other hand, it also harms European exporters. So my question is, on the whole, do you regard the strengthening euro as a positive thing for the European economy, or as sort of a double-edged sword, and you view it as having negative consequences as well? Thank you very much.
On the questions related to elevated uncertainty which we are facing, this is unfortunately true, as it has been true also on a number of previous occasions, because we are now going through turbulent times, and this elevated uncertainty was also coming with COVID-19 pandemic, with Russia's invasion in Ukraine, now with US tariffs. So obviously this forecast has to deal with this elevated uncertainty and factor in all those different shocks, and still to provide our best estimates available. So in a sense, this is the best estimates we can provide, and this obviously then provides us also with an anchor for further decision making as regards, for example, the spring European semester package and broader fiscal and macroeconomic developments. On the question on strengthening of the euro, as you know, European Central Bank is not targeting the exchange rate. We do have a floating exchange rate which moves with the markets, and you already well outlined that a strengthened euro comes with its positives as it has disinflationary effects, especially in this period when the inflation is still above the ECB target, but also it may negatively affect EU exports. So as you rightly noted, it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Thank you. David Thomas, please.
David Thomas from M&I. In light of this much weaker growth outlook, what should the appropriate fiscal stance be for the Eurozone? Especially given that 4 out of 5 of the biggest economies have decided not to take advantage of the escape clause, and those that have, many of them may not make use of the full 1.5% margin. And then in that context, I'd also like to note that Mario Draghi last week in a speech said that escape clauses will only get us so far, and again raised the need for common issuance. Do you agree with him on that? Thank you.
As regards the aggregate fiscal stance, so what we see now from a spring economic forecast, we actually expect budget deficit in both EU and Euro area to edge up slightly. So if we talk the EU from 3.2% last year to 3.3% this year and 3.4% next year. And this does not yet take into account the effects from the use of national escape clause, which obviously will add to this. So when we were initially forecasting the slightly contractionary fiscal stance for this year, this may no longer be the case. On the second question, as regards broader policy response. Well, first is noting that European Commission's SAFE proposal exactly foresees additional issuance of 150 billion euros to strengthen the defence expenditure and to facilitate the joint procurement of EU member states. And from European Commission side, we stand ready to explore further avenues how we can strengthen our defence capabilities and security.
Thank you. We go to the left. Sabina, please.
Sabina Rosetta, ANSA, thanks for the floor. I wonder if the activation of the national escape clause would be also a way to have a shorter excessive deficit procedure in certain circumstances. And the second question, considering this overall uncertainty in the situation, do you see an increased risk of banks' resolution that would justify more than in the past European stability mechanism in place with the new treaty and the backstop? Thank you.
On the first question, as regards interaction between a national escape clause and excessive deficit procedure. So basically, we would continue to follow monitoring of member states' fiscal performance based on their medium-term fiscal structural plans and expect member states to implement their medium-term fiscal structural plans but have a possibility to add up to 1.5% of GDP in additional defense expenditure. And as regards this addition under the national escape clause, this would not count towards our assessment of excessive deficit procedure. So if that would be the only reason why the member state is about 3% of GDP deficit, that would not lead to the excessive deficit procedure. So that's how we intend to run this national escape clause. So yes, to respond specifically to your question, yes, it could lead to shorter EDPs in certain circumstances. Then on the banking sector, well, first of all, I would underline that the banking system remains resilient in the EU despite turbulent times. But as regards new ESM treaty, as you know, ESM is an intergovernmental institution, so European Commission has not much of a say there. But generally, we would welcome indeed a conclusion of this new ESM treaty and also activation of ESM as a backstop to the Single Resolution Fund.
Thank you. Gregorio, please.
Hello, good morning. This is Gregorio Sorgi from Politico. I had a question on Germany. You said that the defense and infrastructure package was not factored in the forecast, but looking ahead, do you think that this package could potentially boost growth across Europe? And another related question on whether you could clarify whether the debt and deficit safeguards continue to apply for countries like Germany that have requested NEC, because there have been concerns that delivering on this major investment plan could violate the deficit and debt safeguards.
On the first question, indeed, we have not factored in this additional German investment package for infrastructure and defense in our spring forecast, as it's not sufficiently detailed yet, and we are now starting the discussions with the new German government on preparation on their medium-term fiscal structural plan, which will specify both Germany's fiscal trajectory and the investment plans under this additional 500 billion euros package. However, we have a dedicated box in our forecast where we use a model simulation to show that this additional investment from this 500 billion euro package could increase Germany's GDP by about 1% by 2028 and by 2.6% by 2035. Well, as regards the safeguards, this is another question. I already outlined the general logic. So we would be applying the EU fiscal rules as they are now agreed, with the only exception for countries which activate national escape clause. They can additionally increase 1.5% of GDP for defense spending between this year and 2028. So following that, the member states in any case should be returning to the normal path of their medium-term fiscal structural plan.
Thank you very much. A few more questions. Susanna, please.
Thank you, Susana Fresh, SIC Expresso Portugal. My first question relates to the to your forecasts for economic growth in 2025. So this year, there is a huge difference between your 1.8 and the government's 2.4. I would like to understand what explains this huge difference. Are you being too conservative, or are they being just using it for campaigning purposes? And also, you, for the first time in quite a long time, you foresee a return to deficit to 0.6 for next year. But the explanation is not related to the increase of defense spending. So I would like to understand what happens if the defense spending also increases, and if is the 0.6% deficit is of concern. Thank you.
Yes. On these questions, so first on the difference between European Commission's spring forecast and Portuguese authorities' forecast as regards economic growth for this year. The difference basically is that the Commission's forecast already takes into account the flash GDP estimate for the first quarter of this year, which was in a sense more negative than expected previously, whereas the Portuguese authorities' forecast does not take this development yet into account. So that's the main difference on GDP the GDP forecast. Then on fiscal side, all in all, we expect that Portuguese is continuing with prudent fiscal policies. So after having for a number of years a surplus, including last year a surplus of 0.1% of GDP, instead on a back of slower economic growth than previously expected. We expect a small deficit this year. That's obviously under no policy change scenario. So, but all in all, we can say that Portugal has been following prudent fiscal policy over the course of last year, and we expect that also debt to GDP ratio will continue to go down substantially over the forecast horizon this year and next.
Thank you. Paola?
Hello, good morning, Commissioner Paola Tamo with the Financial Times. In this forecast, you have assumed that tariffs on most EU goods from the US will go back down to 10%. My question is, have you also calculated growth and inflation impacts if the tariffs stay at the 20% level that they were at before they were suspended for the 90-day pause. Similarly, you've also assumed that reciprocal tariffs between China and the US would go back down to 54%, and that this will lead to a 20% reduction this year and next in bilateral trade. Have you any estimates on the impact that this would have on the EU economy in terms of rerouting, in terms of competitive pressures and so on? Thank you.
Exactly those tariff developments are right now one of the main causes of elevated uncertainty we are facing. So we have done some simulations, based on certain assumptions, and obviously it's difficult for us to predict how things will develop. So we have not done simulations for every possible scenarios, but I think already the ones which we provide gives some estimate of the scale of economic impact of those tariffs, which we see is sizable negative economic impact. As regards tariffs, similarly as with other elements in the forecast, we are basing ourselves in absence of precise data based on, so to say, unchanged policies. So to the extent possible, we were doing it also with those tariff simulations, except for China, where we estimated lower tariffs, considering that the ones which were in place before were untenable. Well, that's exactly what was happened. Those tariffs are lowered in between, but we cannot obviously do those simulations for every possible scenario. But as a situation will evolve, as those tariffs will possibly stabilize around certain levels, certainly we'll be updating this economic impact assessment of tariffs in this regard. Obviously this question on trade diversion from China is still there, maybe with 30% tariff on Chinese exports to US, it's a bit less of the concerns than with 145% tariffs, which was basically prohibitive, but it's still a concern and something which we are monitoring closely.
Thank you. I can take 3 last questions. Luca, please.
Moody's downgraded the USA on debt fears, and Treasury yields this morning rallied. Europe is aiming to increase debt for defense, and although you won't take into account a rating agency and investor may be tough, do you fear repercussion in the market and from the rating agencies?
Obviously, we are following the developments closely regarding the U.S. treasuries, and generally speaking, on the back of this uncertainty, actually we see elevated interest in euro-denominated assets. As regards our increase in defense expenditure, clearly when we were presenting our proposal for national escape clauses, we were also taking into account debt sustainability considerations, which because it's a fact that we have come out already of the previous crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, the energy crisis following Russia's invasion in Ukraine, also following disruptions of supply chains. Already we exited all this with elevated deficits and debt. Therefore, it's important indeed that we are credibly putting our debt on downwards path. That's why when we propose this activation of national escape clause, we clearly frame it both in volumes and durations, so to clearly show that the effects of this national escape clause are going to be contained, and that also it's a period which on one hand will allow member states to restock their military stocks, many of which had been sent to Ukraine, and in any case, in current geopolitical situation, there is a need for larger stocks. And on the other hand, also transition towards structurally higher level of defense expenditure, because as I was mentioning, following this 2028, as of 2029, the general fiscal rules will be applying again, so member states need to adjust by that period their fiscal policies to structurally higher defense expenditures.
Okay, two last questions. Michal, please.
Thank you, Balázs. Michal Kubala with Bloomberg News. It does, however, seem that the defense spending target of 5% will be the new NATO target. I was just wondering if you have more of an assessment of how member states, what's their capacity to accommodate that? Do they have the fiscal space, or would such a target mean cutbacks in other areas of spending?
First of all, I would now not elaborate on eventualities. It's for NATO to decide on exact spending targets. We actually know that some member states are already approaching this 5% of GDP defense spending. All in all, in the EU, as I was mentioning also in my introductory remarks, we are still not even at the 2% target, so we expect prior now to the activation of national escape clause the defense expenditures to increase from 1.4% to 1.6%. Our estimates for the effects of national escape clause were that they can lead to increases in defense expenditures above 3% of GDP. And obviously, we need to be ready for further discussions and measures in this regard, because the security threats we are facing are real. We are living next to the aggressor state, which is ramping up its defense capability, not defense, I would say military capabilities and the military industry very rapidly, spending more than a third of its budget on for military purposes, and openly threatening not only Ukraine but also invasion of other European countries. So this is something which we need to take seriously. And obviously, it will require also some trade-offs as the overall composition on the budget, both expenditure side, revenue side, budget deficit levels, and the national escape clause we are activating will allow member states to prepare for this and to decide on those higher level of defense spending and how exactly it's being achieved.
Thank you. And the last question, I'm sorry, I have to take it from online. I will give the floor to Lynn David from VRT. Lynn, can you hear us? Seems to be a problem. If not, then I go to the second person in the line, Rafaela from ORF, please, online.
Thank you so much. I just have to go back. Commissioner, one question, because like Austria is the only EU country in the ranking where the economy is shrinking. And we also see that like Germany economy is in stagnation. So what's your explanation for that? Has it only to do with the kind of tense trade relations and like the problems with the export? And second question, what does it mean also for Austria with regards to a possible excessive deficit procedure? Thank you.
Indeed. So as regards Austria's economic performance, so the GDP growth forecast for Austria has now been revised downwards, and indeed we expect negative GDP growth in Austria of 1.3% this year. Main drivers of this negative growth are declining investment and negative net imports. As regards not 1.3% negative growth, but 1.3% downwards revision of the growth and 0.3% negative growth. Well, as regards excessive deficit procedure, at this stage we are not taking the decisions concerning the excessive deficit procedure, but we will clearly be assessing the member states where the budget deficit exceeds 3% of GDP, and this is also the case in Austria. According to our spring forecast, we expect 4.4% deficit this year and 4.2% deficit next year. So we'll be coming with an assessment on decisions on excessive deficit procedures in our spring European semester package. Thank you.
With that, thank you very much, Commissioner, for your extensive answers, and I thank all of you for turning up in such high numbers. We are going to continue with a technical briefing in a couple of minutes off the record. Thank you.